I never thought it would end like this. It started as a simple game. No rules, no boundaries, just love shared freely between us all. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I thought I was strong enough to handle it, to watch her with others, to share her love. But as she slipped further away, I realized I wasn't built for this. There was a moment just before everything shattered when I could feel it. The moment she stopped seeing me as her priority. The moment I became just another person in the mix. It wasn't her fault, not entirely. I wanted freedom too. But as the walls between us grew, I could no longer tell if she was still mine. And maybe that was the cruelest part. I had no idea how to fix it. No idea how to bring back what we once had. I remember when we first agreed to this, the idea seemed simple, even liberating. We were free to explore, to connect with others, while still holding on to the love we had. But now, I can't shake the feeling that everything has spiraled out of control. She started talking about him, Ethan, more and more. At first I didn't mind. I convinced myself it was just another part of the process, another way to stretch the boundaries of love. But soon it wasn't just the physical space between us that grew. It was the emotional distance, the kind I couldn't ignore. I tried to be rational, to tell myself I was being unreasonable. But deep down I knew something had changed. And it wasn't just her love for me. It was her loyalty. There was a point when I realized I was losing her, not to someone else, but to the idea of someone else. It's the worst kind of betrayal, and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Ethan wasn't just a passing interest, he was becoming something more. I watched her laugh with him in the way she used to laugh with me, without restraint, without care. There was a spark between them, something I couldn't replicate. My jealousy wasn't even subtle anymore. I could feel it building inside of me, suffocating me. It wasn't about the rules, it was about the connection. About knowing deep down that she was pulling away, and no matter how much I told myself it was fine, it wasn't. I began to question everything, our agreement, our love, even my own sense of self. Was I still enough? Or had I been replaced? This wasn't just about an open relationship anymore. This was about losing her, the way you lose something precious and fragile without realizing it until it's gone. I couldn't help myself. I had to ask her about him. My voice was shaking as I confronted her, demanding answers, but she couldn't give me anything concrete. Her smile, this forced, vacant smile, only made it worse. She promised me it was nothing, that I was still her priority, but the words didn't have the weight they used to. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't lying to me, she was lying to herself. She had already moved on in ways I couldn't understand, and there I was, clinging to the illusion that everything was fine. It felt like I was suffocating. I could feel the walls closing in, but she wouldn't, couldn't see it. My worst fear was becoming a reality. Ethan wasn't just a phase. He was the new reality she was carving out. And I was the one left behind, gasping for air in a relationship I no longer recognized. She couldn't see it. No matter how many times I said it, no matter how many times I begged her to hear me, she couldn't see it. Ethan had already claimed a piece of her heart, and I was just a spectator. I watched as she tried to comfort me, but her words felt empty, hollow. It was as if I was speaking a language she didn't understand anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that was the hardest part. I wasn't angry, at least, not just angry. I was heartbroken, drowning in the thought that I had somehow failed her, that I wasn't enough for her in the way he was. I didn't have the answers. She didn't have the answers. And somehow, that made it all the more unbearable. I wanted to believe that I could handle it, that I could stand aside and let her be happy with him. But I didn't know how to let go when everything in me screamed to hold on. It started innocently enough. I told myself I could handle it, handle her, handle us. But every time she mentioned Ethan, something inside me twisted. She spoke of him with warmth, and that warmth ignited a storm in me. The words we exchanged became more guarded, more fragile. I wasn't sure if I was still her partner or just a placeholder. I hated myself for feeling jealous. I wanted to be the bigger person, the one who could let her be happy. But I wasn't that strong. Each day, the weight of the truth pressed down on me more. I was losing her piece by piece, and I was helpless to stop it. What if she didn't need me anymore? What if I was just another stepping stone on her journey to finding someone else? There was a day when Ethan came over for coffee. I wasn't prepared for the way he looked at her. The familiarity, the comfort between them. It was like they'd known each other forever. I felt like an outsider, standing there in my own home, watching as they exchanged stories and laughter. I tried to keep my distance, to make myself busy with something, anything, but it didn't work. Every glance they shared, every laugh, made me feel smaller. I wanted to leave, to escape the suffocating feeling that came with watching them together. But I couldn't. I didn't want to seem insecure. So, I stayed. I smiled through the cracks in my heart, pretending I wasn't crumbling inside. I wasn't sure if I was losing my mind or just losing her. It wasn't just jealousy anymore. It was fear. Fear that I was no longer the center of her world. Fear that I was being replaced. We agreed on this, didn't we? We said we'd be open, honest, and there would be no favorite. But every day I saw them getting closer, and the promises we made seemed more like lies. I began to doubt everything. Our agreement, our love, our trust. I wanted to talk to her about it, to lay everything bare. But every time I tried, the words got stuck in my throat. What if she didn't feel the same way? What if she was already in too deep? So I kept quiet, watched her drift further away, and hoped that maybe one day, things would go back to the way they were. But deep down I knew that wasn't possible anymore. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to confront her. So, I asked flat out, "Are you falling for him?" The silence that followed was deafening. She didn't answer right away, and that terrified me. Finally, she admitted it. There was something between her and Ethan. It wasn't just casual. It wasn't just physical. And that's when it hit me. She was no longer mine in the way I thought she was. I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. But hearing it out loud made everything real. There was no going back. I didn't know how to fix it, or if I even wanted to anymore. The pain of the truth was too much to bear. I didn't know what to say after that. She had spoken the words I was afraid to hear, and now the silence between us felt more suffocating than ever. We tried to keep going like nothing had changed, but it was all a lie. I was drowning, and she was swimming away from me, no matter how much I reached out. We could keep pretending for a little longer, but deep down, I knew we were both already gone. She was in love with someone else, and I couldn't compete with that. I should have seen it coming, should have known the risks of opening our relationship, but I didn't, and now I was paying the price. The love I thought was unconditional, the love I thought would survive, was slipping through my fingers. The cracks in our relationship were impossible to ignore now. It wasn't just about Ethan anymore. It was everything that had been left unsaid between Rachel and me. The small lies, the fleeting moments of jealousy, the moments where we both pretended everything was fine. But it wasn't. I could feel the distance growing each time Rachel would mention him, each time she'd smile in that way that was once reserved for me. I began to resent her for not seeing it. She was becoming someone I didn't recognize, someone I didn't trust. I knew she was trying to make it work, but it wasn't enough. Not anymore. I had hoped we could navigate this, but the walls between us had become so thick, they felt impenetrable. I tried to hold it together. I really did. I thought that if I stayed calm, if I acted like everything was okay, I could stop the bleeding. But I could feel it. The jealousy had taken root deep inside me. I hated it. I hated how Rachel seemed to lose herself whenever Ethan was around. How she would laugh more freely with him. How her eyes would soften when he spoke to her. I wanted to scream, to demand she choose me. But I couldn't. Because part of me knew that if I pushed her too hard, I might lose her altogether. And yet, keeping silent was slowly destroying me. How long could I pretend this wasn't killing me? The small acts of distance were getting harder to ignore. Rachel would leave for hours, and I wouldn't ask where she was going. She'd come back smelling like someone else's cologne, with a look in her eyes I didn't recognize. Each time I told myself it didn't matter, that she had every right to explore. But it did matter. It mattered so much that it began eating away at me piece by piece. I tried to fill the void with distractions, work, friends, anything to keep my mind from going to that dark place. But every time I saw them together, every time she spoke about him with that familiar warmth, I felt like I was drowning. Was this really the life I had signed up for? I tried to talk to her again. This time, I couldn't hold back the pain anymore. "You're slipping away from me, Rachel," I said, my voice breaking. I was desperate, pleading, hoping that maybe this time she'd hear me. But her response was just as I feared. She told me she was still here, still committed, but her actions spoke louder than her words. She said she loved me, but every day that love seemed to diminish, replaced by something else. Ethan was becoming her priority, not me. And I was becoming someone she tolerated, rather than someone she truly needed. She didn't say it, but I could see it in her eyes. There was no turning back from this. I knew it was over. It wasn't one big moment. It was 1,000 small moments that added up, each one cutting a little deeper. Rachel had made her choice, even if she hadn't said the words aloud. She was no longer the woman I once knew, and I wasn't the man she needed anymore. There was nothing left to save. I didn't know if she ever truly understood the depth of my pain, or if she even cared. I didn't want to face it, but I had to. I had to let go, even if every part of me screamed to hold on. I loved her too much to keep living in a lie. And maybe, just maybe, she did too. But love wasn't enough anymore. It never was. I always thought that love was supposed to be enough, that it could weather any storm, survive any challenge. But now, I'm not so sure. I tried to hold on to her with everything I had left, but it was like trying to catch the wind. Each day I saw her drift further away, like a shadow slipping through my fingers. I kept telling myself that it was just a phase, that maybe if I just gave her space, it would come back to us. But the truth was, we were two different people now. She had moved on in ways I couldn't understand, and I was left behind in a world where we no longer fit. Every word I said felt like an echo, empty and hollow. I couldn't keep pretending anymore, not when I was the only one still holding on. She told me she needed space, that we needed time to figure out what we really wanted. I agreed, though the words tasted bitter in my mouth. Time. How much time did we need? How much space? I had already given her so much of myself, but it never felt like enough. She was drifting, and I could only watch. I wanted to scream, to demand that she stay with me, but I held back. Maybe because I knew it wouldn't matter anymore. If you have to ask someone to stay, then they're already gone. And she was gone. I was just too afraid to admit it. I could feel it, the pull of something else between us. Something I couldn't fight, no matter how hard I tried. She was falling for him, and I was helpless to stop it. At first I thought maybe it was just a phase. Maybe it was something we could get past. But the truth was undeniable. I had become a shadow in her life, a memory of someone she used to love. Ethan had taken my place, and I was too broken to even pretend to fight for her anymore. I wanted to be angry, to lash out, but there was nothing left. I was just empty. I thought we could still fix it. I really did. I tried to tell myself that we could still find a way back to each other, even with the distance between us. But every time I tried to reach out, she pulled away. And then there were the moments when she would speak of him, Ethan, without hesitation, without guilt. I tried to swallow the jealousy, to accept that she was finding something in him that I couldn't give. But it was too much. I couldn't watch her slip away, not like this. The truth was, she didn't need me anymore. And I didn't know how to let go. I finally asked her. I had to know. "Do you love him?" My voice cracked as the words left my mouth. It wasn't a question I wanted to ask, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the truth, even if it was the hardest thing I had ever had to hear. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just looked at me, and I could see the hesitation in her eyes. And then, almost reluctantly, she nodded. My heart sank. It felt like everything in my world was crumbling, piece by piece. She was in love with someone else, and I was left with nothing but the remains of a relationship I thought I could salvage. The weight of it all was too much. I had tried and tried again to salvage what we once had. I had held on, even when I knew it was slipping through my fingers. But now, in the quiet of the apartment, with the air thick with unspoken words, I knew it was over. I couldn't pretend anymore, and neither could she. We had given each other everything we had, but it wasn't enough. And now, I had nothing left to give. The hardest part was that we both knew it. The love that had once burned so brightly had faded into something unrecognizable. It was time to let go. Time to walk away, even though every part of me screamed not to. It was strange, this feeling of emptiness. We had shared so much, so many years, so many moments. But now, as I stood at the door, the weight of the goodbye felt almost surreal. How could something that once felt so solid, so real, now feel so fragile? I wanted to say something, anything to make her understand. But the words were stuck. There was nothing left to say. She had already made her choice. And I had no choice but to walk away. Are you sure about this? I asked, my voice shaking despite myself. I wanted to believe that maybe we could find our way back, that maybe we weren't as broken as we felt. But I could see it in her eyes. She had already decided. I was no longer the one she needed, and I couldn't force her to stay. No matter how much I wanted to, I had to let go. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was the right thing. The truth was, we had already lost each other long before this moment. It had just taken us both this long to admit it. I looked at her one last time, trying to memorize every detail of her face, every line of her expression. She had been my everything, my constant. But now, we were strangers. And as I stepped away, I realized that maybe we had always been strangers in some way. We had built a life together, but we had never truly been the same people. I wasn't the man she needed, and she wasn't the woman I wanted anymore. It was painful, but it was the truth. It was time to say goodbye. It was time to let go. I stepped outside into the night, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. The air was cold, but it felt like a fresh start. I had let go. I had to. As much as I wanted to hold on to the past, to cling to the person I thought I still knew, I realized it was only dragging me down. This was the end. And as painful as it was also a kind of relief. I could move on now. I could finally heal. The love we had once shared would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined who I was. I had to learn to live without it. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. It's been months since I walked away, and now as I stand at the edge of what's next, I feel lighter. The pain isn't gone, but it no longer consumes me. The silence in the apartment is no longer suffocating. I've learned to live without her, to exist in the space I once filled with doubt and regret. There are moments when I still catch myself wondering if I made the right choice, but I know now that healing takes time. And time has shown me that it's possible to move forward. I ran into Rachel a week ago. We spoke briefly about everything that had happened. There was no animosity, just a quiet understanding that we had both changed. Seeing her again didn't stir up the anger or the regret I had expected. It was as if the air between us had cleared. We had both become strangers in a way, but in a peaceful way. Our past was no longer a wound but a memory, distant and soft, like a photograph faded with time. Walking away from her was the hardest thing I've ever done, but with each passing day I found pieces of myself I didn't know I'd lost. I've learned how to be alone, how to be content with my own company. It hasn't been easy, but I've come to realize that the only person I need to answer to is myself. There's still pain, but it's no longer the kind that drags me under. It's the kind that reminds me I'm alive, and I'm learning to live again. There are nights when I still miss her, when the memories creep up like shadows in the dark. But I've learned to let those moments pass. I no longer linger in the past, chasing ghosts of who we were. I've realized that part of healing is accepting what has ended, without trying to rewrite it. It's not about forgetting, it's about finding peace with what was and moving forward. I'm not the same person I was when we first met, and neither is she. And that's okay. I don't know what the future holds, and for the first time in a long while, I'm okay with that. The future no longer feels like a heavy weight to bear. It feels like a possibility. I've learned to trust myself again, to believe that I'm capable of more than I ever gave myself credit for. I can't change the past, but I can shape what comes next. And that's the greatest freedom I've ever known. It's strange how life goes on, even after everything crumbles. The world doesn't stop just because your heart is broken. I spent so many nights wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. The quiet after the storm seemed endless, and I found myself sinking into the silence, searching for something to grasp onto. For a while, it felt like I was drowning, trying to keep up with a current that was always pulling me under, never giving me the chance to breathe. But as time passed, I started to find pieces of myself that had been lost along the way. It was as if those fragments were scattered throughout the chaos, waiting for me to piece them back together. I remember the first day I woke up without the weight of that constant ache in my chest. It wasn't a dramatic moment, just a quiet realization that I had survived. The storm had passed. It was over, and I was still here. At first, I wasn't sure how to feel about that. The sense of survival was there, but it was tainted by the absence of everything I once thought I needed. Still, in the stillness of that new morning, I realized something profound. I had myself. That was all I had left, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. I had become so tangled in our past, in the idea of what we had been, that I lost sight of the person I used to be. I remember how the memories, like a persistent echo, would chase me into the night. They would seep through the cracks of my consciousness until I couldn't escape them. But now, those same memories felt softer, less sharp. They no longer had the power to consume me. The pain was still there, lingering in the background like a distant thunderstorm, but it was no longer the storm that defined me. I could hear the thunder without fearing that it would break me again. I was learning to live alongside it, to acknowledge it without letting it dominate my every thought. It was like stepping into the sunlight after being in the dark for so long. The warmth didn't hit me all at once. It was gradual, subtle, like the slow unfurling of a flower in the morning light. Each day, I felt a little lighter, a little more present, and a little less tethered to the past. I was starting to build again, brick by brick from the ground up. And for the first time in a long time, I realized that I didn't have to do it alone. I had myself. And maybe that was enough. I've started taking small steps again, learning to trust the world around me. It wasn't an overnight process, and I didn't wake up one morning with everything fixed. For so long, I was trapped in a cycle of fear and doubt, always looking back to what I lost. I lived in the shadows of that loss, replaying the same thoughts over and over in my mind. But now, I find myself looking forward, not with anxiety, but with curiosity. I think back to the days when I felt like I had no direction, no clarity, and I wonder what could the future hold. What would it be like to be whole again, to step into something new without the weight of the past? I don't have all the answers, and I don't think I ever will. But I'm learning to embrace the uncertainty. Life isn't about having everything figured out. It's about moving through the pain and discovering new things along the way. There's something beautiful about the unknown, about the journey of finding out what comes next. And as I move forward, I realize that the pain I felt, while intense, taught me a lot about myself, what I am capable of, and what I truly need. The world might not have given me all the answers, but it did give me the strength to seek them. Each day, I find that I'm more willing to take chances. I'm more open to experiences, to meeting new people, and to rediscovering old passions. The small steps add up. It's like a healing process that, though slow, feels steady. And though there are still days when I wonder if I'm really okay, I remind myself that it's okay to not be okay all the time. It's okay to feel uncertain. It's okay to move at my own pace. There are moments when I miss her, when the memories rush back like a wave. The good times, the laughter, the way she made everything feel easier. I think about the way she would smile, how her presence seemed to light up even the darkest of rooms. Those were the moments I took for granted, the ones that felt so real and so permanent. But now, those moments don't define me anymore. I've realized that it's okay to miss someone without letting them control my life. I've learned to cherish the memories without getting lost in them. The past is a part of me, but it's not all of me. And for the first time, I'm starting to feel like myself again. It's a strange process, letting go. I think we all hope that one day, the pain will just vanish, but that's not how healing works. It's more about accepting that the past is over and that the only thing we can control is how we move forward. I'm still learning that every day, but I'm getting better at it. There's no need to rush. Healing takes time, and sometimes you have to give yourself permission to feel the weight of what you've been through. But also, you have to know that it's okay to let that weight go when you're ready. I've learned that the heart can heal, just like the body. It takes patience. There are scars, and there always will be, but those scars don't have to define who I am. They're just marks of survival, proof that I've lived through something difficult and come out stronger on the other side. I've started to reconnect with the things I used to love. I've picked up old hobbies again, painting, writing, just being alone with my thoughts. It's amazing how those small things can bring so much comfort. I used to think that happiness came from others, from relationships or achievements, but now I see that it comes from within. It's about finding peace in the quiet moments, in the small victories. And sometimes it's okay to not have everything figured out. I don't need to be perfect. I just need to keep moving forward, and I know that in time, I'll find my way. Reconnecting with these passions has brought me more joy than I ever expected. Painting, for example, is a way for me to express feelings that I can't always put into words. The act of creating something from nothing, of taking a blank canvas and slowly bringing it to life, has become a metaphor for my own healing. I'm learning to fill the emptiness inside of me with my own creations. And in that process, I've found a new sense of self-worth. Writing, too, has become a release. I filled pages with thoughts, with dreams, with fragments of my soul. Sometimes I go back and read what I've written, and I can see the growth. How I've transformed from someone lost and broken into someone who is rebuilding, who is learning to be whole again. It's not an easy journey, but it's mine. And that's enough. I've learned that healing isn't linear. Some days are harder than others. There are moments when I catch myself thinking about what could have been, or when the loneliness creeps in like an old friend, reminding me of what I've lost. But I've learned to sit with those feelings without letting them control me. It's okay to feel pain. It's okay to be imperfect. I don't have to be okay all the time. I've accepted that. And in that acceptance, I've found a kind of freedom. I'm no longer trying to outrun the past. Instead, I'm walking alongside it, learning from it, and moving forward with a sense of strength I didn't know I had. There are still days when the ache comes rushing back, when I remember what it felt like to love her so deeply, when I remember what it felt like to be in her arms. But I don't let it consume me. I don't let it be the only thing that defines me anymore. I've learned to live with the memories, to carry them with me like old photographs. They're not something I want to forget, but they're also not something that needs to hold me back. There's a balance, and I'm finding it.